What's up, guys? It is the 16th of July, and what a hell of a freaking weekend we all had. As far as just
Mhm.
activities, what I was doing is, just a lot of stuff around the house, taking care of the grandkids, that kind of stuff. But to watch and see what was happening with the Trump rally and all that, that's what me and Patrick are here to talk about. The different things we're going to see. So Patrick's back on because they can't have a really important conversation about the market without having this sumbitch on here. So what's up, brother?
I appreciate you, pal. Thank you for the kind words. Love being here.
Well, I appreciate you coming on all the time. So here, just so you guys know who Patrick is. Patrick runs a branch in Texas for Security National. So we're peers.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say competitors because he's kind of in a different market,
Yeah.
different group of people he
Yeah.
sells to. But we're peers, but competitors in the sense of our company puts us all in some sort of stacking of production.
Yeah.
So they might try and pitch his competitors. Patrick's a buddy. Patrick's a friend. And as you have seen, every time he's on here, he delivers information that is something you can take and just really, really expand your mind with. So let's dig in, brother. Let's dig in backwards. Actually, what we had with the just the big news of what
Yeah.
happened over the weekend at that Trump rally. What do you think? Let me just ask you something else. I'm not going to get into market shit yet. What do you think freaking happened out there? I mean, look at it. That I'm a guy that knows
It's
a
pretty
lot of people
concerning.
in a lot of places when it comes to law enforcement and military, and I'm getting my balls busted left and right about my statement of, there's conversation, some being told to stand down. If that really happened, that to me seems more reasonable than them seriously allowing that to happen. So your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tremendously concerning that you would have any point of contact with a line of sight to any presidential potential candidate, right? And within 150 yards, I think, right? 150 to 200 yards. I mean,
150. It was within 150 yards,
and
as I
it's,
understand it.
it's unbelievable not to only have that line of sight possibility open, but then to have that be the exact spot where the individual attempted to climb up on. I mean, it raises a lot of questions.
100% does. And if somebody does not question it, they just say, "Hey." I had one guy kind of bust my chop saying, "Hey, you're not in that sniper scope. You know what was going on there. You don't know the things that
Yeah.
were happening." I'm like, bro, that holds a lot of water in a combat scenario because things are
Yeah.
always moving. They're supposed to be out there in advance. They do have an advanced team to go out there and set everything up, know where the issues were. That was recognized. You have a group of people on the ground. It's on video footage screaming. He's right up
Yeah.
there. He's got a gun
For
for over
three and
two
four
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Yes, that was well enough time. And whether or not that guy had a good enough vantage point, here's the other thing. I've had a friend of mine saying, "Dude, but at his vantage point with the pitch that route, maybe you couldn't see him." There's no way that sniper can see President Trump without being above that crest, period.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
could see that guy. I've been able to, I mean, I've been a shooter, I've been a hunter, I've been all this stuff all my entire life. I'm not trying to bust anybody's balls. I would rather believe that somebody's pulling some shit in the background, some dirty stuff, than thinking that our people that are trained to be able to do that
Or
missed
that
it.
inept. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and then of course, then there's watching the show with the guns and trying to.
Unable to
I'm sorry,
holster and
can't
it
holster.
I
What you
mean the
don't
whole
see
entire thing, yeah, was
but you
just
didn't see on
awful.
any of these replays. I was watching it at Scotty's house. There's a female agent that comes around the driver's side of the vehicle as they're putting Trump in, and she was literally just flagging everybody, pointing at everywhere with their gun. You don't see it on the news. I'm like, dude, check this
Yeah.
out. She's literally pointing at everybody. By just the grace of training, she had her finger off the trigger the whole time. At least that, right? At
Yeah.
least that. So sorry, I had to go. You have to go off a little bit on this. But
Yeah.
what do you think it did to the market? I mean, let's just show what mortgage-backed securities look like. Actually, no, no, no. Let's look at this, guys. Look at the
Yeah.
Dow. Look
It's
at that.
unbelievable. Yeah.
All-time highs. We couldn't get this thing to break 40 to save our lives for the longest time. Now look at this. Just overnight, it's just skyrocketed.
Just surging. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's reminiscent when Trump got elected, right? The day he
Yeah, I
got
mean
elected,
that's inevitably what happened on Monday morning is the odds of a President Trump election obviously skyrocketed. I mean, it was conversations all over the news. And a Trump policy and a Trump administration is going to be one that's geared towards growth, right? They're going to be geared towards tax cuts and spawning growth and growing the economy at its best capacity, which is great for stocks, not necessarily great news for bonds.
And look at this right here. This is 11 of 2016. This is the Trump election right there.
Yep.
Right there. Look how it kind of flattens out. Everybody's like anticipating. And this was said, if Trump got elected, it's going to kill the markets. Look what happened. It jumped and
Yeah.
it kept climbing through his presidency. Now, we also had quantitative tightening through a good chunk of his presidency. Look at this. This is
Yeah.
when we switched. This is when we switched, guys. Look at that drop. But of course, COVID played into that and all that kind of stuff. But look at this, man. Look at that surge that we got out of this whole thing. You had interest rates went up during Trump's presidency right after.
Mhm.
I was sitting in Memphis watching the election results come in the next day. Bonds opened up, took a beating, and it continued to take a beating. But we also went into quantitative tightening at that same time.
Yep.
And then they decided to open up the easing again. Then you had COVID. That's why we saw interest rates do what they did. I think we would have been better off if they continued the tightening back in 2000. That was 17. They started tightening, correct?
Yeah, and if you the really challenge behind all of that was the 10 years leading up where rates were at zero, right? I mean, it took a expansive amount to even grow at that point, and Trump had talked about the idea that we're going to have to get away from zero at that time, but rates did jump quite a bit in the aftermath. And you and I both remember, for us professionally, and talking about P&Ls all across the country. We had that big old chaos down in the Austin region in 2018, right? I mean, it destroyed profit and loss statements for most mortgage companies across the country.
A lot of companies took a beating to that because they weren't anticipating what we were getting into.
Yep.
And right now, man, it's still only the stronger surviving right now. Well, let's look at the bonds. We had PPI come out, and what people, guys, there's been a lot of data about the inflation's getting better, inflation's
Yeah.
cooling. We're doing all these things showing the CPI is getting better. I don't know everything that's going in to cook up this CPI, but this PPI number, this is a big deal. Tell us about what just came out.
Yeah, the producer price index is a front load inflation data indicator, right? Where most people focus on the idea of the consumer prices. However, the increase begins at the producer level, right? So at the production side. And if you look at just 2023 alone, producer prices on a core level are up 3% since the beginning of the year, which is fairly dramatic. And inevitably, that increase the price either A, has to eat into company margins, or B, they have to pass that along to the consumer, right? So it boosts the idea that you're going to get towards the latter part of the year and potentially have this just kind of spike in additional inflation pressures for sure.
100%. So, and it's not
Yeah.
just guys, just the producer side of it, because that goes on to a couple of different steps, just from where you produce it, to where you have to basically, you got the shipping side of it, you got the
Yeah.
warehousing side of it, you've got the distribution side of it, you got the retail side of it, all those things that happen in goods and in goods, not so much services, because services have their own different costs that you'll have increases on, but we're talking about goods themselves. If
Yeah.
at the producer level you're seeing that kind of an increase, there's also an increase in the transportation level, because what we're looking at right now with respect to energy costs, and then
Mhm.
the warehousing level, because energy costs, you have to cool and maintain the lights and utilities and everything, and then of course the retail level. The
Yeah.
costs are going up for people that are having to keep the lights on in their retail stores.
Right.
Amazon's cutting into that, of course, but they still have to ship this stuff. When you start getting into all that, you're going to see that happen on the consumer end of it and the
Mhm.
personal consumption end of it. But I think we're not done seeing inflation actually play out where it really lies, or actually being up higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's can be proven through today's retail sales report, right? So we want to expand to the market and cheer that, retail sales in June grew at 0%. But if you take away gas station impacts, and you just look at the consumer spending level, consumers spending grew 0.4%, which would have been far more aggressive than the 0% growth that the market was anticipating. So again, there continue to be these influences that are driving numbers oddly. And until you break them down and look at the actual impact, then you can see how really important it is. So, I mean, consumers, we've talked about this a lot. Like, we have yet to see evidence where consumers are like, hey, I've finally got to the place where I need to stop adding to my credit cards. Like, because online sales were up, 1.9%, which was tremendous.
significant when you can consider how many people are buying out there.
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of, I've been on the phone with a few people. They are worried with what's going to happen with inflation and CPI when you get into with an inevitable Trump presidency. So they say, well, that's very, very bullish. We're going to have a big problem. Well, if you look back, I've looked back at some people are commenting on the history. So you look back at the previous term, we can see that the headline CPI moderated from 2.5% to 1.4%. That import
Mhm.
prices dropped from 3.8 to 1%.
Yep.
3.8% to 1. So I know that we're talking about the tariff thing that he talked about and all these things, but he, as of the president previously, all that stuff went down.
Yep.
So I'm not convinced of the worry that everybody has in this narrative of doom and gloom economically if you have a presidency back in with the policies of Trump and his cabinet. So let's take a look at the mortgage-backed
I feel
securities and see
like
what we're staring at.
his presidency allowed the country to run more like a business for the 4 years that we saw previous to.
In reality, it's what the country is. It's a corporation in
Yeah.
reality. You start looking at the
Yeah.
US government. So here's we are, guys. Last week we peaked out at that point way above what I anticipated us getting to, but we still have our massive ceiling up here, and now we're starting to reverse. Money's flowing through the stocks, out of the
Yeah.
mortgage-backed securities. This may be our ceiling. I hard to say. I felt at one point that this particular line right here, this ceiling would hold pretty hard, but we had enough readings come out, just rocket us right up. What is your thoughts, Patrick? Where do you think we're heading?
Yeah, I mean, if you click back over to the 6, which still is the highest volume coupon at the moment, I mean, that 101.7 is the same exact blockade that you're seeing right there on your chart. Is, we have tried to press against that level a couple of times now, and it failed quite a bit. And then if you look at the 10-year, right, trying to get below that 41.98 line that you and I talk about in the mornings, that I talk about in my update. I mean, that's holding the line like it's Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart, which is what I mean, that thing's holding fairly strong at that level as well.
We got below it and pulled right back to it. Look
Yep.
at that.
Yep.
It's that right there is gravity.
Yep.
Heavy gravity. It's just not wanting to pull above that. So yeah, that these are going to be our barriers that we're trying to overcome. And with the news that's coming out, especially with PPI, what's coming out next week, we think that might be influencing on this.
Yeah, you've got some global S&P numbers, but the biggest key is going to be PCE on Friday. I mean, it's pretty boring up until that point.
So one thing we got a bet you and I have got to make. We got rates cuts coming. We got potential. How many rate cuts can we see this year? As everybody keeps
Yeah.
asking, what's the Fed? I am going to bet, and this is where I'm going to land. I'm going to land. It's going to be, and we're playing prices right rules, closest without going over. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go with one. I'm going with one rate cut, even though I don't believe there should be any. Personally, I don't believe we should have any at this point. We're not seeing enough stable data, in my opinion, to claim that we should have one. But one is what I'm going to go with. You were saying how many earlier?
I'm calling 2.
They're calling two. You called
Yeah, the
three
CME.
offline, but I gave you
Well,
prices
the
right rules.
CME
You
group
changed your
is
mind.
calling 3. Yeah, the CME group now has a greater than 50% probability of a September, November, and December cut. So the future forecast prices are all pointing in the direction that we're going to go 3. If you look at the 2-year sitting at 4.4, I mean, that's another indicator. It's 90 basis points away from the Fed funds rate at the moment. So, market participants are betting that the next year is going to look a little bit different. So, I mean, at the moment, it looks like it could be more aggressive based on, the other indicators you can look at to support it. But I don't think they hit 3. I think they'll hit 2. I think they'll hit September and December.
I'm thinking just one of them, and we'll just see how that plays out. Because if it does do it in September, I don't know if they're going to. I don't know. We might see. We'll just play that up. I'm just going to go with my one. Curious, what did all those readings you're just referencing? What were they saying at the end of last year?
Oh, they were
Were they
reading 6 to 7 cuts at the end of last year was the market forecast and
They're
projection. Yeah.
they were forecasting 6 to 7 cuts for
Yeah.
2024. So
Yeah.
there's where I stand with the forecast, guys. I didn't want to say that. I want Patrick to say that because
Yep.
I want him to say that. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in the forecast stuff myself, just because forecasts have been so wrong in an environment that is so emotional. Is
Yeah.
what we're seeing. I could just call patterns and look at these patterns, and even those patterns give up craziness a lot. So
I think the big key is going to be the labor softening, right? If we continue to see dramatic softening within the labor market. We're not creating the jobs that we're the pinpointing. I think if you look at claims, the one place to really study this is to continue to watch weekly claims, right? I mean, we're at that 230 level. If we ever really push between 275 and 300, that's when the game's going to change quite a bit.
And Powell himself said that that's what's going to be their driving force is is jobs. If jobs
Yep.
lose, then we'll drop rates. If we continue to see job growth, then we can't,
Yep.
because again, job growth creates money. People spend money, and we have proven that our particular social structure means spend more of it, spend more
Right.
than what you have. My thought, just with that, jobs being the situation, there is potentially a belief that if you have Trump coming into office and his monetary policies and what people believe happened and how they existed during his presidency, during the current administration's 4 years or coming up on 4 years, that there might be a bullish idea towards hiring and expanding their businesses because of what could be coming. That might have some influence on the job numbers and might slow down some of these rate cuts from 3 to 1 or none. So that's
Agreed.
just, again, emotion runs the everything, and since
Yes.
emotion runs it, I know how people are thinking with respect to, hey, if we even have an inkling we're gonna have 4 years of this idiot, then we're gonna have to cut it back and we're gonna have to get really, really lean and mean. But if we end up having a switch and going back to what we saw during the first presidency of Trump, then we feel confident to go forward and build our businesses. So
Well, I think the biggest key to look for in that is going to be government spending, right? And the idea that the issuance from the Treasury and record-setting issuance, right? And the fact that we're going to end this year over $1 trillion in interest expense, right? Is finding that person that's going to pull the reins back on that and try to take us from out of that danger zone.
and part of that's going to be he needs to go in and help solve what's going on with the wars across the
Right.
globe. They were talking about who win. Did you win Russia or Ukraine? He's like, no, just stop. We need to
Yeah.
quit the killing. The death needs to stop. It's not worth it. I mean, look at the destruction. We have so much history being lost to bombs. It sucks. It really,
Yep.
really freaking sucks. Well, I appreciate you, man. We'll see what happens. And we got a
Yep.
Perry's pork chop on the line here, folks. That's what the stakes are. And those are big steaks. I freaking love that damn pork chop.
Got
So
it.
not to use steak and pork chop incorrectly in the phraseology here, but thanks, brother. And we'll see how things are, and we'll circle up with you guys on
Yeah, we'll
Friday.
keep talking about it.
Definitely. Take care, my friend. Of
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me.
course.